This is TG with Tech Made Easy. Welcome to my channel. My channel is all about making things affordable, practical, and easy. And today we're going to discuss who is Linux for. In particular, I'm going to talk about my neighbor that just switched to Linux. He has a laptop, a touchscreen laptop. He was having problems running Windows with it. So I've been talking to him about running Linux the last month, and he finally gave up, and we put Linux on it. But I'm going to talk about the experience that he has had, the pros and cons of using Linux on his desktop. Now, I do want to go over what I consider a list of priorities on. I really believe that Linux is really for way more people than what is currently out there. And Linux is gaining ground. So they're now at 3% desktop, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you look at the world, that is a lot. And obviously on the server sides, they're probably more like 80-90% on the server side. But I want to just make a tier of what I think the people that, from those that should or could be in Linux, on down to those that I probably wouldn't recommend for Linux. But let's just go ahead. Let's get started. Let's get in this. We're going to jump into my tier, and then we're going to talk about the experience, which distro we decided to go with on his laptop, and again, the pros and cons to that as well. Let's get started. Okay, so this is my list here. Is Linux for everyone? Obviously, it's not for everyone, but I do believe it's for way more people than that are out there. And so let me just go over this and explain how I came to the conclusion of this list. And again, if you're a Linux person, you may have a totally different opinion of this list. But this is what I find out. I think most IT professionals, because a lot of companies are just Windows-based only, but I think most IT professionals should understand and use Linux, or not use Linux, but be familiar with the desktop, be familiar with Linux itself. I'm not saying they have to know it a great extent, but there's so much out there, servers and stuff like that IT professionals, I think, should know. And again, a lot of IT professionals are specific in one thing. They might be networking, or they might be desktop support, or they might, anyway, it just goes, it's a wide variety, but I think all IT professionals should be familiar with Linux and the Linux desktop itself. And then I got next here is techies. I put myself in the techies category. I'm not an IT professional, but I like computer stuff and experiencing new things, not way overboard with that. And it was a little because I used Windows for so long, and I used to be in the IT profession over 20 years ago, and so much has changed since then. In fact, when I was in my IT profession, our networking was NetBIOS, not even TCP/IP. And so anyway, but I've always liked that tech side of things. So I am no means a Linux guru. I like using Linux as a desktop. I'm not a command line person. If you watched any of my videos before, I'm not a command line person, but that's why I really rely heavily on the GUI of Linux. It doesn't mean I never go to the command line. Obviously, some of the things I do and some of the videos I do, you have to do that. But techies are somebody that is willing to figure things out and try something new. And so, and I'm not going to get into whether Windows or Linux is better, and there's privacy issues and this and that. And so a lot of techies will go over, they're concerned about privacy and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into that. I am a privacy person, but only to a certain extent. And I think a lot of tech companies are going overboard with the privacy issue of following people and all the information gathering. So now web-based businesses. So I ran into a professional, and everything they do is web-based. All their accounting, their appointments, and all that kind of stuff. If you got something like that, why run Windows? And I actually tried convincing him to give it a try, and I would help him anyway. You know, he decided not to do that, but anybody that's web-based, you know, you don't have to worry about being compatible with anything, because everything web-based works on Linux. It's not that big a deal. And if you need a word processor, then you can throw on one of the Linux flavors of word processing, like LibreOffice, OnlyOffice, so on and so forth. And so companies, and I don't know how many companies are web-based only, but this guy was excited because he could just, everything was on the web, so it didn't matter where he was at, his home, his office, everything. The whole business was on the web. The other one that I have here is, believe it or not, Basic User. And this is where my neighbor falls in. I mean, he is so computer illiterate. There's no way he could ever install Windows on his own. I mean, he just isn't. He's very smart, but he's not tech savvy smart. And and this is one reason why moving him over to a Linux desktop, and I'll explain why that was a great move for him, and I'll get more into that. But a basic user, if all they're doing is searching the web and going on social media and maybe have a need for a basic word processor and spreadsheet, or manipulate some graphics or do some videos, whatever they do, you know, a basic user has in mind or do, and they're not using any proprietary software. And believe it or not, if you're not a Linux user, there's a lot of Linux apps, Windows apps that are on Linux as well. And so unfortunately, because these people are basic users, a lot of them have never even heard of Linux. And so but those are people that, you know, you don't have to have powerful computers to run Linux and the latest and greatest and so on and so forth. And I know eventually my wife is probably going to move to Linux. I think my oldest son eventually will be on Linux as well. So anyway, and again, it'll make more sense when I get into the distro that we chose for his laptop and why Linux works for him. And one of the biggest reasons why it works for him is he's not using any proprietary software. So the next one is gamers, and I put gamers down below because some gamers are willing to move to Linux and some aren't. I mean, there are some compatibility, but what you have to understand is the compatibility with running games now in Linux is so huge. I think I heard or read somewhere that 80% or more of the games out there will run on Linux now. And so, and with all the Windows 11 coming up and all the different requirements and having to upgrade computers, and again, I've done videos on how to run Windows 11 on non-conforming hardware. The biggest problem with that I see down the future is that there's going to be a lot of applications that are going to look for a TP 2.2 hardware on your computer. It's not that you can just install it. It's going to look for that security hardware on there. So, you know, but a lot of gamers could move to Linux if they really wanted to, and some gamers are what I consider tinkers as well. And so, but not all are ready for Linux. So it's a certain type of user that is gaming that is willing to go to Linux. And then what I have down here is proprietary software, business and personal. And let me explain here, because we own our own business, my wife and I, and she uses QuickBooks to run everything. Now QuickBooks is available on the web, but you can do everything on the web with it, but you have to pay for that. And it's not like you don't have to pay for QuickBooks, but she looked into it and she just, for our business needs, she doesn't want to, it's a lot bigger expense to do it on the web. And I do know companies that use QuickBooks on the web, and that's all it is. They don't. It's all web-based QuickBooks for them. And then there's personal software. And what I mean by personal software is a lot of times people have personal software they just can't live without, and is not on Linux, and I totally understand that. Even me today, I'm fighting that a little bit, and I'll talk about that when I get to graphic professionals. And then there's engineers, architects, so on and so forth. A lot of those programs are written for Windows, and so some of those guys, some of those professions can move to Linux, some can't. It just depends on what they're doing, but it's really kind of a hard one. And I throw programmers in there too, because some programmers like to program, like the tools in Windows, and some like the tools in Linux, and there's a big push, like most programmers should be using Linux. But I've talked to some programmers, and they really like some of the tools on Windows that aren't available in Linux, and so it's kind of a mixed bag there as well. But obviously there's a lot of programmers that use Linux, and I probably should have put programming up there somewhere, because it is kind of one of those things where it's up to that individual programmer. Then when I say graphic professionals, because there's so many things that are proprietary on the Mac and on Windows that help with graphics design, and it's not that you can't replace those on Linux. You can. When you're so into those proprietary software, it's hard to move away from it, and I understand that. And that's what I want to talk about. Even for me, I still haven't given up my proprietary video editing software, and I run it in VM, and it actually runs pretty good in VMware. It's the only VM I could use. I've tried them all, and it was the most efficient one to run my video editor. I don't have any lag time, and again, I'm not doing tons of video editing. All my video editing is really family and YouTube. And I'm not doing 4K yet as well, so it's not, and so I just deal with it. And I tried to really look at all the Linux ones and switch, and maybe eventually I will. And that's my only crutch right there with Linux, is I still use my video editor. And if you want to know what that is, my video editor is Vegas Pro. So that's kind of my list, my breakdown. I put ... because, you know, I'm not going to cover everything in here. There's lots of reasons why people aren't going to be desktop users of Linux. Obviously, like I introduced before, there's a lot of Linux out there that most of the web servers and a lot of servers are Linux. So anyway, so let's get into my neighbor. And it's kind of exciting when he finally agreed to go to Linux on his laptop. I want to go over some things that were at first a little frustrating to me, because I don't really use a laptop that much. My wife uses a touchscreen laptop all the time. My neighbor uses a touchscreen laptop. So let's go in and go into the software that we chose, the distro that we chose for his laptop. Okay, so before we talk about my neighbor's laptop, I just want to show you, if you've never seen a Linux desktop, this is my Linux desktop. And you can put any background you want on here. I just kind of like this one. Let's just jump ahead and let's just talk about why my neighbor decided to just go ahead and go to Linux. And my neighbor, again, he's kind of a minimalist. He's not super techie, but he uses his laptop all the time. He does a lot of Word documents back and forth with other doctors, other clients. Even though he's retired and sold his business, he still needs that capability. Spreadsheets every now and then. He likes to listen to music, so he needs something to play his music with. He needs to view images, and sometimes he needs to view X-ray images, and so we got GIMP for that. And I'll talk about the apps that we put on his phone. And but anyway, this is why he decided to go ahead and go to Linux. First of all, this is an i3. It's only 2 cores, 4 threads. It's got 12 gigabytes of RAM, which I was surprised he had that much, and then a 1 terabyte hard drive. So, and I've supported him and his family with their computers and upgraded computers in the past with them, did trade work and stuff like that. He retired as a chiropractor, and so and then sometimes his Windows 10 would run slower. I go clean it up and get it to perform a little bit better. And but anyway, before he retired, he had his contracted IT guy went ahead and put Windows 11 on his laptop, and then he comes to me and he goes, "Hey, my laptop is running really slow. Can you help me out?" And I looked at it and I couldn't find anything wrong with his laptop. I did all the stuff I did. I said maybe we can debloat it, but I don't know if it's going to help. And so, I mean, it was really struggling. Like, you went to go do something, it would just take forever. And that was the other problem. If I had to work on it, it would take me hours, just because any utility I was trying to do there would just take like 5 or 10 minutes just to get into it. It was terrible. I don't even know how he was using it. But what happened was, and that's when I said, you know, maybe it's time with your laptop, how old it is, maybe we should just try Linux. And he's like, well, maybe we'll consider that. But then he was searching the web for something, clicked on a link, and he said his computer was now locked up, no longer available, and to call an 800 number, so it was some type of malware or ransomware. Now, as soon as he saw that, he shut his computer off because he didn't want it to infect it anyway. So he calls me up saying, "Hey, what can I do? I got this message." And I go, "Man, that sounds like ransomware," and I don't dare turn it on because I don't know if that was just a dialog box and they wanted you to call and get some money out of you, or if they actually have infected your computer. And so I says, "Why don't we just take your hard drive out, put Linux on it, and then I'll set it up. You can see if that's going to be functional. I'll go ahead and look for viruses on your existing hard drive." I did find two viruses, but I don't think, obviously his files were still accessible, so the ransomware didn't hit his computer, and it might have just been, you know, a ransomware message to convince people to call and give him money. I don't know. But so anyway, so he agreed, and so this is what we did. So we had to decide which desktop to use, or which distro. And I first installed Linux Mint on there, not realizing how much he used his touchscreen and scrolled and did pinch views and stuff like that. And let me just show you really quick how that functions in Linux Mint. Okay, with Linux Mint here, I recorded this with my phone. So when you go to scroll, then it doesn't scroll, and it highlights stuff and see it jumped me into this video, and so you can't scroll with your finger. Now you can obviously with the mouse pad, but see, now I'm trying to pinch and zoom it, and it won't do that either. So that was the thing that just wasn't going to be acceptable for him. And if there is a way to do this in Linux Mint, leave a message if you know how to make it pinch and zoom on a touch screen. That'd be great. When I was first researching this, it did seem like there was maybe a file in Linux that you could turn on and off that allows this zooming. But at any rate, if you know how to do that, leave a message below. I didn't realize his computer was his touch screen, to be honest, at first, and that's why I put Linux Mint on there. And don't get me wrong, Linux Mint works with a touch screen, but pinching and all that kind of stuff, it just doesn't work. Oh, and also I did forget to mention, he did have a terabyte hard drive. His IT guy must put it in, but it was just a standard hard drive, a laptop hard drive. It wasn't an SSD or an NVMe, and so I went ahead and got him a 1 terabyte NVMe to put Linux on. So Linux Mint, especially XFE, is my favorite desktop, but my second favorite desktop is KDE, and I decided to go with KDE Plasma, and it worked great. Let me show you. Holding my camera, so I apologize, so you can see the laptop. And with KDE Neon, you can see I can scroll. You can see I can zoom, pinch, zoom out. It worked great. But I will say this much: just like Linux Mint, I tried some other Plasma desktops like MX Plasma and Kubuntu, and this did not work in those. And I figured because they were KDE Plasma that they would work. And so I don't know why KDE Neon works out of the box with pinching. Again, like I mentioned when I was showing Linux Mint, and it responded just like it did in Linux Mint. Somewhere where there was a file in Linux somewhere that you could turn this pinching on and off. But also too, there was research I did that says that you can turn this on and off in the browser. But I went to the config file in the browser, and I couldn't even find that section, that config statement that they said to make to true. And I compared both Firefox in Kubuntu and in KDE, and all of the features were the same, or all of the options were the same in those config files. So I don't know why this pinching and scrolling isn't working in those other desktops. If you know that, and you're a Linux person that knows the answer to this, please leave a comment below. It'd be really helpful for me to know that. Anyway, so this is why we chose KDE Plasma or KDE Neon, is because it worked out of the box for the scrolling. Is very happy with it. So KDE Plasma, he was fine with that, and so we went ahead and did that. So KDE Plasma here is in the background, and I want to talk about KDE. This is not a review on KDE, but there are some things that you need to know. And you know, as a new user, when you're installing, I believe, this is my personal opinion, and I might be biased because I started with Linux Mint, but there are some nice features about installing distro that at least gives you an office suite and certain things to start off with, where Neon is more and it's actually great, but it gives you a clean install. There aren't very many apps installed, and so you just go and choose your apps. But for someone that's never used Linux before, that could be a little different when they find out. I guess no different than Windows. With Windows, you don't really get a basic word processor, I guess, and then a text editor. So that wasn't a big deal because obviously I was going to set him up with certain programs, which I'm going to go over here in a sec. But one of the things I do want to talk about before we go into the programs that he's using, there's a couple of things I think is really helpful to know about KDE Neon. Whether you're a Linux user or not, and that is when you install it in the file manager here in Dolphin, there aren't the normal folders in here, documents, pictures, videos, so on and so forth. Now, there's two ways to get them in here, but this is very important. So if you want, you can create your folders, like let's just create a music folder for a minute here. Okay, so the music folder, and see how it isn't over here. Yeah, you can attach that over there. Let's go add to places. So now you have your music folder. But this is the thing that I found out about this here. And it doesn't come with Rhythmbox. I went ahead and installed Rhythmbox. So when we go in here and we want to set our default folder, we go in here, music, and here's my default folder, and I go browse, and there is no. There is. Where's the music folder? Okay, and so the problem is I don't know. Because I've always used Linux Mint, I've never seen a distro, installed a distro that didn't have these folders in here. And at one point I did install Neon, but maybe I don't know if this is something new they did, or maybe I just didn't pay attention to it because I went through a distro thing where maybe I wanted to switch from Linux to something else, so the problem is when you create this in here, yeah, you can create them, and a lot of people show on YouTube, just go ahead and create your folders manually. The problem is I don't know how Linux handles these things, and I don't know if this would be the same in Linux Mint, because Linux Mint, they're already there. Most distributions, they have these folders in there automatically. And I can understand why they didn't do here, because they're trying to make this desktop simple, simplistic, and you basically customize it the way you want. You put what folders you want in here, you put what programs you want on it. It comes installed with very minimum programs. But you really have to go to the command line and do the command line to install these in here, and then they will work. Even the download, I created a download folder, and Firefox did not download to that download folder. It downloaded some default folder that's in the Firefox tree structure or file structure. So let's just go ahead and delete this, and let's go to the command line, and we're just going to copy this right here, and I'm going to have all the command lines or commands that I'm going to do in the terminal. I'll put them in the description below, and so just put this here, and then that goes ahead and creates all of your documents that you need, and they will now function correctly. If I download something, it'll put in the download music. In fact, let me just okay, so I already put some music in here, and now if we go over to multimedia rhythm box, we go to preferences, and now we can hit browse and hit home, and there's our music. So we'll just go ahead and open this. So here we have our music that we just added. So I thought this was very important to share with you, because originally I created those manually, and I was like, whoa, wait, where's the how come there's no music folder? When I would download, I would go, wait, how come it didn't go into the download folder? And now if we go here and we hit download Chrome and we accept that, so now when we download something, it's going to show up in the download folder. So what you need to do, you notice how I have the download folder over here, none of the others are here. You can just go ahead and you can just start saying add to places, and so that's what I'm going to do here really quick, is add these to places, and you can move them around in whatever order you want these in. Actually, I'm going to move this up here, documents, so on and so forth. You can see how that works. So it's a tricky thing. I don't know why KDE just doesn't put these in there, and again, I'm not a Linux guru, and I don't know why if you create them manually in here it doesn't work. You have to do it through the command line. I don't know. It's a quirky thing. But other than that, I love this desktop, and because that's basically, to me, that's one of the more quirky things about KDE Neon Plasma, or just KDE Plasma period. There are a few other things too, and one thing that I want to talk about is Firefox. Really quick here, you're going to notice that I did this screen recording, and as I'm scrolling up, you'll notice that the thumbnails didn't get refreshed in Firefox. And I had this problem both in the live section and after I installed it. And I was like, man, what is going on? And then I could play a video and then shut Firefox down, and it would continue playing. And then eventually what would end up happening is it would come up with an error, that Firefox was having an error. And so so then when what happened is I decided, I looked at Firefox, and it was the snap version of Firefox. And so I'm like, oh man. And that's one reason why I don't like snaps. And I'm not saying that not all snaps are bad or anything like that, but they just have not solved these problems with snaps. And so I went ahead and just installed the Flatpak version, and then all my problems with Firefox went away. Firefox was really glitchy. I don't know what the deal is with Ubuntu and their snaps. But they're still buggy. I thought they'd worked some of those things out, but they just haven't. So just so you know, that those are the two things that I would really do if you're going to use KDE Neon, is go ahead and create your folders through the command line, and replace Firefox with the Flatpak version of Firefox. And I personally always install Flatpaks. All the applications that I installed for my neighbor are all Flatpaks. And so let's go over the applications that I installed for my neighbor. So one thing I forgot to mention, he does have an iPhone, and he just wanted to be able to get his pictures off and any files, music, whatever. But now KDE, a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, they created a KDE for the iPhone, and it is slick. And this, I'm not making this video to show you how to use KDE Connect, but it worked beautifully for him. But and that was already pre-installed on KDE Neon. But if you have other Linux or Windows, you can install that as well. But anyway, what we did is we installed LibreOffice so you could have a word processor and spreadsheet and be totally compatible with Microsoft Word and that Office suite. And I set the defaults to save as Word documents, Excel documents, and then also too, the program actually came, or Neon comes with a document viewer, PDF viewer, which is a great one, and then went ahead and put in Rhythmbox and Clementine. Just let him decide which one he wanted to use. VLC, and then Internet. Like I said, I got both Firefoxes in here. I didn't get rid of the other one, the Snap one, yet, and installed the Flatpak version. We installed GIMP. It has a really good image viewer, and that is pre-installed, and so that's all you needed there. So we really didn't have to install a lot of apps, mostly LibreOffice and GIMP, and then of course Clementine, Rhythmbox, and Firefox, the Flatpak version. And so now one thing I do want to talk about really quick here is because he has an iPhone, his pictures were coming over as this HEIC, which is the iPhone's new format for pictures. You can change that though in your iPhone for compatible mode. You go into the camera and go into format, and you can change that. When you change it back, because his wife uses Windows, and the problem is with this new form of photo that iPhone has, it's not compatible with. It's just not as compatible with as JPEGs are. So, but I will leave this description again. But these two commands right here, this one allows you to open up that HEIC file picture, and then the second one allows you to view them in a thumbnail. So I went ahead and installed that, and then also too we installed the Microsoft fonts, which is this line right here. And so that's really all we did. And you know, when I say pros and cons, it wasn't really pros and cons. It's like, what, you know, I basically ran into a couple of challenges with the folders and with Firefox being a snap and not working right. But other than that, he is happy as a lark. It works smoothly for him, does everything it needs him to do, doesn't miss Windows now, and so that is it in a nutshell. He's very happy with the laptop, very, very snappy, and I'm glad I was able to help. And again, he is a basic user, and I'm not saying a basic user can go in and install Linux and start using it. They might need someone to install it for them. And it depends on the user. But if you are thinking about going to Linux, I would try and choose. I actually would just start with Linux Mint or KDE Neon, but watch videos on it before you do that, so that you feel comfortable using the product. But anyway, this is TJ with Tech Made Easy. I hope that was helpful. Have a great day.
Now that was easy peasy.